Hello, this is Jared. I'm playing Oxygen Not Included. This is my playthrough of the Radioactive Ocean Asteroid. So I'm on the Radioactive Ocean Asteroid homeworld currently, and I'm building a system for growing sleet wheat. And I'm going to have one for Pincha peppers as well. So for sleet wheat, I'm going to need to really cool off this spot. It needs to be below -5 degrees. So I've got a vacuum area around it. So when I start the cooling process, I won't be cooling the main base. So that's the reason for putting up here in this vacuum spot. I'm just going to get rid of this heavy wire that's running through this as they build this. In the previous episode of the Desert Lens, I have created a system for getting oil or production happening. So I've got an oil well over there and a system to actually cool it off. So now that I've got that, I'm going to let it run, generate some oil. But in the process, I figured I might as well dig out some lead. Now I've noticed some scorched spots there, so I'm going to have to be careful about that. I'm creating a room, tiny little room over here to put some of those scorched seeds, because if my pip gets access to them, they'll plant it, and that could be quite deadly, resulting in zombie spores wherever it is. Alright, so I created a brine line in the last episode, and what I'm going to do now is connect into that and bring that line to the top of the base. And with that brine, I'm going to use that as a spot to keep a vacuum from coming into contact with the farming area. So that's essentially going to, when I fill the farming area that's growing sleet wheat with carbon dioxide, I won't have that leak out into space. Zombie spores really like carbon dioxide, such as this area here. So instead of digging into it, I'm going to fill it in from the corners so that I can kill off all the zombie spores instead of letting that into the main base. I'm going to actually cut the oil well off when it runs out of water on the first liquid reservoir, so that the second one can be dedicated towards oxygen, because I do not want to run out of oxygen. If I run out of water for the oil well, not as a big deal. The other thing I'm going to do is put an alert system to detect if water is ever missing inside this pipe, hence oxygen will get thin, and will tell me so that I can try to fix that problem by bringing more water to this asteroid. So that's an important thing. So it's looking for water, going through a NOT gate, and if there's ever not water, it's going to send a true signal here. I will just simply say, oh, starting day. So I'm going to actually get it to pause the game, zoom to this point, and it'll say no water, and I'll deal with it then. Dupes here are continuing to fill in this dangerous zombie spore area. So the idea is they'll be able to build tiles on the corners and be able to destroy it once it gets outside of the actual zone. I'll keep filling it in until there's nothing left. So the two different farm rooms exist. It's got brine keeping a barrier from the carbon dioxide that's going to be in there from escaping. It also has, I've got some brine being delivered to the cold zone. The bottom of that is actually brine that's going to be cooled off to under 5 degrees temperature. So that's going to be appropriate for that. Also putting some automation. That's going to have two jobs. One to drop off the input ingredient, which is dirt in this case for the sleet wheat, and take the sleet wheat plant seeds out automatically. And the same thing over on the top here. So the only difference on this one, this is going to have a heating spot on top of it to actually get warm. So I'll make that about 45 or 50 degrees. Alright, so just bringing power into this zone, because the automation is going to need power in order to be able to run. It's going to wait a while for that brine to get into that sleet wheat zone. But I'm going to put automation here on a pump shut off. The idea is I want the liquid reservoir for these two things. So water on the bottom, polluted water on the top. And it's going to have automation such that if I detect 50% or less liquid inside the liquid reservoir, it'll allow more in. Otherwise, it will block it. Ultimately, what I want to do is just create an infinite circuit around so I get an even distribution of heat through the growing area. You'll see that once this all is complete. Another little change I need to make. I didn't give enough room for the heating area above. So I'm actually going to be dropping some liquid down here, but I'm going to expand this a little bit because I need enough space for a heater and automation to be able to detect the appropriate heat so I can shut off that liquid heating unit that's going to be sitting in the top. and I'm going to have the polluted water go through this hot zone and go through the actual spot where the plants are, such that it won't take too long to get that high temperature, or 50 so degrees of temperature to the plants, such they'll be able to grow. You don't need a lot of them versus the sleet wheat. So these Pincha plants, or whatever they're called, I just need about 3 of them for the amount of dupes that I want to have. Initially 12, but by the time I increase my dupes to perhaps 20, I'll probably be on a different source of type of food. But for now, I'm expecting to have 12 dupes to be able to survive based on this. Now it's going to up the food quality for me, but it's also meaning that I don't have to manually attack those pips and rely on that, which is an annoying process for me. So switching over to that would be good. Now what I'm doing here is having the output. So this is the ingredients that come out of this. It's going to go on this conveyor rail, and of course that's going to make its way down to the deep freezing line, same as the meats from the pips. And that means all the ingredients will be frozen and they'll never go bad. So it doesn't matter how long it takes for cook to get to them, they'll stay good. I've almost cleared the first zombie spore area. I'm going to just destroy the tiles on the side, fill that in, and then I'll be able to expand down and look for some more lead. Oh, of course, more zombie spore areas to deal with, of course. Alright, this sleet wheat is going to need a cooling area, so I'm actually going to build this over here. It's going to have liquid tuner and a steam turbine, eventually some water that turns to steam, and all the piping that will deliver cool water that goes through the turbine, or not through the turbine, but through the aqua tuner into the spot where the sleet wheat exists. Now, because I have water going into sleet wheat, I don't want it to get below 0 degrees, so I'm going to have automation to tell it not to go into the farm when the farm area reaches a certain temperature. As these dupes just take out the last little bit of the zombie spore space, which is actually completely gone now because it's completely filled in, they can move down and work on the other zombie spore area. As you can see here, I've got a very small circuit that polluted water is going around, primarily just cooling some batteries and the steam turbine above. So I want to actually include more parts of the actual base itself to have cooling to happen down there. So what I'm doing is having this polluted water be directed down into the base. Main thing that I want to concentrate on right now is just the oil well. But eventually, and now I actually know the direction that this is going, so I can actually fill in all these bits here. But here's the oil well that I want to keep cool. The next spot after that later on will be about the food growing area, because I've had to actually move my farm far away to get a valid temperature spot for mealwood. So that's what's going on here. Okay, it didn't take too long to do all the piping for this. Now I've turned on the system. Now polluted water is going down. It's eventually going back up. So it is keeping the oil well cooler enough, at least to the point. Actually, I'm going to change this setting here to run as long as it's under, let's say, 60 degrees. Allow that thing to run. And it may shut off every now and then, but the cooling should bring it back down under 60 so that it turns on. Over to the home world. This is the cooling system that just needs to have some power put into it. I'll need some water here in a little bit. But I could feed various different things in there. That could be ethanol, brine, polluted water. Probably choose brine since I've got lots of that in base. But that's going to keep the sleet wheat cool. So over here, I'm looking for stuff for my dupes to do. I'm just going to get them to dig out algae, which I'll need for space missions. A little bit of iron ore, that won't be a bad thing to have. And figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of their time there. This rocket is filled with water. I'm going to send that back to the decimal lens to send that into the oil well. And that way I'll get more oil from that. And eventually, actually, on the next mission when the rocket comes back, it should have 2 liquid reservoirs filled with oil. So that'll be a good thing. Just looking at skills, engineer got a little bit stressed, so took their skill set down, but give them piloting at least so they can at least fly back to the decimal lens. Just putting the piping in place that's going to deliver the cool brine into the farm area. Notice that I've got that with radiant pipes. So that cold brine is going to go into here. It will be perhaps minus 5 or so degrees, but I'm going to have a logic there to say don't go into that zone unless it's needed. And the goal will be to get it to be around 2 to 3 degrees. Sleet wheat requires water, so I'm going to actually put a permanent water line heading towards there, and it's going to go into that liquid reservoir until that liquid reservoir is filled up 50% of the way. But I also need a temporary line that skips on, continues on, and fills up this spot on top and underneath the steam turbine. Once I've got enough water here, I can destroy it and not worry about that. But this is going to have a little bit of logic here. Again, mentioned it's going to be temporary, but this is for me to watch and turn off manually once I feel that there's enough water inside that chamber. All right, we can also see the brine heading towards the liquid reservoir. That's the bit that's going to actually be cooled and sent into the farm area for cooling. I've got all the brine that I now need on the farm area. So what I'm doing is I'm going to actually destroy some of these liquid bridges and reverse the direction so I can actually drain this line, and maybe I'll put that inside a liquid reservoir, a temporary one somewhere. The idea is I want to reuse that pipeline for polluted water because I want to bring polluted water down. I've got a polluted water geyser, which is excellent, but I've got to create some fertilizer. That's part of the plan for the farm, is to have a fertilizer. But the fertilizer is also going to be production of natural gas. If I want to actually cook sleet wheat and those peppers into pepper bread, I will actually need some natural gas. And I don't have any geysers yet. Of all the asteroids that I've discovered, not one of them has natural gas. So I can create a little bit with fertilizer for the time being. So this is the Pincha pepper farm. Actually has so that's the brine line that used to be there. I converted that to polluted water, and that is going to do the same logic. It's going to fill up this liquid reservoir until it gets 50% of the way, and I'll have the rest of it go in infinite loop, feeding into those planter boxes, but also taking heat from it into sending that towards the plants, so heating the plants up so that they're the appropriate temperature to be able to grow. The rocket has arrived in the Desolans. I'm just going to turn this on here. And that's going to send water into the asteroid, and that's going to head towards the oil well as electrolyzer for oxygen. So there it is, water heading down here, and this is going to allow me to continue the oil production. Oil is just about ready to go out, but I'm going to wait for that to fully drain of water, shut off that valve, and then when I've noticed that I've created a break in that line, I don't want to connect it until I actually have that water drained and that shut off actually turned off. Water is starting to be delivered in the chamber underneath the steam turbine. That is good. I'm also going to create 2 liquid shutoffs. So one's going to be directing the brine into the thermotuner. So when it's not cold enough, that will be enabled, putting it through cooling. And if it's not, it will alternately go into the skip it essentially and go back into that liquid reservoir. The other one is going to be pointed towards the farm. And the idea is I'm going to have a temperature gauge inside the farm that says, is this cold enough? And if it's not cold enough, it will direct brine to go inside there. So that's that liquid shut off for that. And I'm going to have to be careful to not go over the hot zone tile taking heat. That's why I'm kind of doing that funny pattern, but it will make its way right there. So there's a thermosensor that's going to indicate whether that cold brine has to go around the farm or not. When that's in there, I'm probably going to make that about 2 or 3 degrees. Also want to have some liquid dropped off on the top of the steam turbine, so that's why I'm putting this in there. And probably going to take that cold brine and send it on top of this. But I'm going to be careful because I don't want to freeze that. Maybe I could use brine for the steam turbine, but instead what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a thermosensor here and say, is this spot getting too hot? And if it is getting too hot, put that cold brine through it, and only when that is the case. And that's going to allow me to keep the top of the steam turbine cool, because that needs to stay under 100 degrees, or otherwise things go bad. Now, I may not necessarily fill this this chamber fully with water. A little bit of food there, excellent. Why not? Because this may not be a long-term location for this, and it doesn't act as kind of a hydro battery for me. Anyways, over in the Decimal lens, I notice my dupes here are a bit bored or idle and don't want to see. Oh, okay, let's block off that. That's just going to have excessive amount of hot carbon dioxide. Completely not needed. All right, I think this is enough water for on top of the steam turbine. The gas that I would like to have in the farm is carbon dioxide. The reason for that is that will be essentially a sterile environment for the seeds that fall there. I do have automation to take them out automatically anyways. It doesn't really matter. But my dupes that are in there are going to be in ammo suits anyways, so they're not really going to be bothered by the fact that it's carbon dioxide that's in this. So I'm going to put a filter maybe at this location here to filter out carbon dioxide. I'm just going to put in a regular filter. And it's only going to have, like I said, once I finally get this filled with carbon dioxide, I really won't have to use this anymore. So it's just kind of a one-time thing. Otherwise, if it was consuming the carbon dioxide, I would actually probably build a more efficient filtering system with the gas reservoir. But that's not needed here. In the Decimal lens, I am just running out of things for these dupes to do. Oh, no, they just can't get down there. That's why they're stuck without anything to do. Okay, basically their main progress now is to get lead. Iron ore is also not a bad thing for them to get. Okay, so that is looking good. I am going to need farmers to go into this farming area. So I'm just having a look here between granite and what is this, igneous rock? Igneous rock seems to do a little bit better at blocking radiation. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build it underneath this series of solar panels. Actually going to have a second line there, and this is just going to give a little bit of protection for the farmers that are constantly in the two farm areas while they're in there, and any further construction that goes on in that area, the dupes will be protected. Probably should have done that first before I built this, but anyway, that's okay. So that's not a bad idea to do that first before you do any major construction in space. As this structure is built, you can see that it's taking down the radiation level quite a bit, so that's going to be a good thing for those workers. One of the things I want to start collecting is natural gas for the advanced cooking range. So I've got two filters there, one for natural gas, of course, but I also have one for chlorine. I may have uses for that in the future, but it's primarily natural gas that I care about here. So the first one I will set for natural gas. The second one I will set for chlorine, and I will direct the gas towards the gas range that I set up in the kitchen area in the future. All the water should be emptied from the rocket. It is. I can now turn this off, and once the dupe turns off that valve, I can actually start to fill this. Do that as high priority so they get in there. I can start to fill this with oil. And once those two liquid reservoirs are filled with oil, noting that they're in a vacuum area, so they're not going to heat up the rocket itself. So now that's going to be filled up. I'll be able to send that back to the home world so that I can start to produce plastic with it, which I'll have some uses for, probably more steam turbines, but I want to get some tubes in the home world so they can be transported a lot faster around their asteroid. Okay, it is time to start producing some fertilizer along with natural gas. So I get both those things with this machine here. It just needs to take some polluted water. So I've got a polluted water line that goes up from the top. Let's see, just need to connect that over at this spot. And then I'll be able to get that fertilizer, which can be used in the farm for doubling up the speed at which plants grow, producing more food. Okay, so I've got two liquid reservoirs filled with oil. I can send this rocket back home to the home world there, and once that lands, I'll be able to direct that oil to the oil refinery, turning it into petroleum, and then I'll send that to the polymer press to be turned into plastic. Now, running out of things to do for the dupes here, so I figure one of the things I might as well get them to do, I'll have to give them one of the dupes here the skill, but I'll build a telescope here, give it some protection from radiation by building the actual building around it, and they can see what these question marks are. I'm wondering if those are another asteroid, or perhaps it's just other things that I'll want to explore later on. But I don't have a lot for these dupes to do other than just maintaining that oil well. Ultimately, I would love to have this as an unmanned asteroid, but it's just not possible with the oil well, because the oil well requires someone to operate every now and then. Just realized I don't have any oxygen going inside the rocket when it lands over here, so just going to put that line in there. So as I mentioned, one of these dupes is going to need the astronomy skill, but I might put them through the skill scrubber before that is set. Okay, let's see. I'm going to have supply go through the skill scrubber. I no longer have a Great Hall because this plant is not growing. That's because the polluted water line, didn't really think about that, is too cold for it. So I'm going to actually put in, I've got someone that has the arts, 3 different art skills, so that shouldn't be a problem to fix. Okay, so you can see brine going into the farm and going into the aquatuner. So that's going to go to the point where it gets about 2 or 3 degrees, appropriate temperature for sleet wheat. The area above the Pincha peppers, which I haven't planted yet, so let me plant those. I only need 3 in order to get feed the number of dupes that I have for the moment, anyways. But I'm going to put in the automation in, so soon as the peppers land, they're out of there. They go to the spot where they can be flash frozen and brought to the, well, or stored there and then cooked in the kitchen. I don't have any sleet wheat here because there's no natural sleet wheat plants, but I know that I have some in the verdant world, so I'm going to send at least one person over to the inverted world. They actually shouldn't have to do any digging. They probably have access to it. All I really need to do is get them to put it into this machine here. I'm going to turn off the copper metal, but before I do that, let's see, there's a sleet wheat, so I want them to bring in the sleet wheat, and I'll start to have that planted in my farm. Let's set that to be a high priority, and then I'll eventually get I only need about, what do I have, 10 or 15 of those seeds to get myself started on that. Alright, so it's very important here that I'm not inputting my water into the rocket, so I destroyed that tile before this rocket landed. I'm going to turn this on here such that the oil can now get out. And then once the dupe goes in there and enables that, I should then be able to see oil flow out of this and head towards the refinery. So that might be the dupe that's taking the call. They'll go inside the rocket, just hit that. Oil starts going out. Yep, that's the case. That's heading down. I even have an extra liquid reservoir, so I don't have to wait for that to completely be used up before the rocket can take off again. So now that I have these farms, you can see some sleet wheat being planted here. I need to make sure that I have the dupe, or a couple dupes that have the farming skill, crop tendering. So I'll select a few of them that aren't overstressed in terms of like their morale and bonus. They have the capacity for it, and that way they're the dupes that will take the fertilizer and essentially give me a doubling the speed of those plants, so giving me a higher yield of food. So the sleet wheat is not happy with the temperature, but that will cool off in time. So what am I doing here with these 2 bins? I'm essentially making it a little bit easier for my dupes to load in the materials for the farm. So that's dirt for the sleet wheat and phosphorite for the Pincha peppers. So instead of having to have the dupes actually go up into the farm, put the Atmo suits on and all that, they can just put it inside this bin, and this will deliver it via automation into the farm, and actually even put it inside the farm tiles themselves. So all the dupes have to do is make sure that these bins are loaded, and everything will be automated from that point on after that. So I discovered this machine here that actually gives me the ability to give someone a skill, or not a skill rather, but a positive trait. I'm assuming it's always a positive trait. If anyone ever has a negative trait, I'd be very curious to know, but I've used it quite a few times and they always tend to be, they've always been something positive. So they're either more strength, or they don't need as much oxygen, or something like that. sunshine is the one that I typically get. They're more optimistic. So I've set in miner, and they have air consumption rate minus 50 grams. That's actually one of the better ones. So that's awesome. Excellent. Okay, so just taking note here, I actually can't produce any plastic at the moment because I have a polymer press that is flooded. So I just need to turn that water into steam, and then I'll be able to start to produce it. So as I use the metal refinery, that's going to increase that temperature, and eventually I'll be able to do that. But for the time being, I have frozen food that's lasting forever, and I just have to wait for a metal refinery before I get more plastic. So we're in a really good spot. This will be a sneak peek of what I'm going to be up to next episode, but I want to get up to the top of this world here in the inverted spot, building some solar panels and other things. We'll see how I do that then. I did not pay enough attention here in the inverted world. I have zombie spores, a tiny bit of zombie spores right there. I'm going to save it such that they can't leave this biome, but lots of it down here. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to solve that. I'm going to get rid of that. That is a next episode thing. So this tiny bit here should be easy to get rid of. I'll just be able to perhaps knock it out with some tiles, but the rest of it, I'm going to need some power brought into this area to handle this situation. All right. Missed that one. I actually looked to see if I can go back a few cycles just to avoid this from happening, but it's just more than a few cycles, so I'll endeavor to solve that in a different way next time. I'd like to end this episode on a positive note. There's the Pincha peppers and sleet wheat growing. The farm sleet wheat on the left is not cool enough. It will get cool though, so it's not all bad. Okay, so 2 new farms here. Actually, the first 2 farms that I've had in this because I was going after the locavore achievement and the carnivore earlier. But now that I don't have to worry about those, I want to up the morale quality that I get from my food. So I have some sleet wheat. I've got some Pincha peppers growing. That's going to be the 2 ingredients required to create pepper bread. I do need a gas range, but I will do that in the next episode. Also give you a hint of 2 things that I'm going to be doing in the next episode. One, I want to get on top of the inverted world, and I discovered I have zombie spores. I have a solution for dealing with that, but I'll make that happen in the next episode. So hope you like this, like the video, subscribe, and see you next video.